So we are in 2 Kings on page 471. 471.
I did find the scripture, by the way.
Oh, you did? What is it?
Yeah. 471. It's full of stuff. Adonai is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. Shouts of joy and victory are in the tents of the righteous. Adonai's right hand is mighty. Adonai's right hand is lifted high. Adonai's right hand is mighty. It's Psalm 118, 14 through 16.
Beautiful.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
That's a number verse.
Okay. So there's quite a big gap in between where we were last week in Judges up to Kings. So I was trying to look up how many years the book of Judges covers, and I was having a difficult time. Some places say like 200, some say 400, but then you also have 1st and 2nd Samuel in between there. So during the book of Judges, there was 12 judges that were like the rulers over Israel, and Israel had a case of what I refer to as the grass is greener syndrome. So they saw all of these other people around them that had kings and started whining that they wanted to have a king like everybody else, and why can't we have a king? So the Lord's like, fine, I'll give you a king. So he gave them the king that they thought they would want, which was King Saul, who was tall and handsome and well-spoken and whatever. So that didn't go well. So King Saul, but then Samuel was told to go to see Jesse, and that one of Jesse's sons he would anoint one of Jesse's sons to be the king. And again, he still had it in his head as soon as he saw the firstborn son, this tall, handsome, strapping young man. He's like, oh yeah, that's got to be him. And the Lord's like, no, I don't look at the outside thing like you guys do. I look at the heart. So he went through all of these sons that are lined up, and he's like, is that it? And then they're like, oh, well, there's David. He's over, playing with the sheep. So he brings David, and the Lord's like, yep, that's my dude. So he anoints him. David becomes king. You can read all about that in Samuel. And then David when he dies, his son Solomon takes over, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, because Solomon's mother was Bathsheba, who David was adulterous with, and then ended up murdering her husband, and it's a whole thing. And then Solomon also had that lust of the flesh, that sexual sin, and was prone to exotic pagan women who ultimately led his heart away from the Lord. So that's super sad. And so there's also in 1 Kings, I think it's 1 Kings, it tells the story of Rehoboam and Jeroboam. So Jeroboam was a servant in the king's house, and he was told by the Lord that he would inherit 10 of the tribes. So there's 12 tribes of Israel. He was told he would inherit 10 of those tribes, and that happened when Rehoboam, which was Solomon's son, didn't seek wise counsel. So he wanted to raise the taxes, and all of the wise counselors said, don't raise the taxes, it's going to make the people mad. But all of his little friends are like, yeah, raise the taxes, let's get ourselves a Ferrari and some Sea-Doos and, those things that you can like ski on the water upside down. So he did it. And then the tribes all split, and 10 of them went with Jeroboam, and that is in 1 Kings 12. And then it's a lot of kings. Some of them are good, like maybe 2 or 3 of them are good, but most of them are not really.
Did not do right in the sight of the Lord.
Right. Yeah, that's it. They did evil in the eyes of the Lord.
Right.
Yeah, and there's also in 1 Kings the story of King Ahab and Jezebel. That's in 1 Kings 17. So we know all about that. And Elijah, the prophet Elijah, after he killed like a ridiculous amount of people, like 400 of these prophets of Baal, killed him like himself. And then hears that this lady Jezebel has got it in for him, and he's like, oh, I'm so scared. And then he runs and hides, and it was just ridiculous. But anyways, he came back to, trusting and following in the Lord. And I believe it was him, not Elijah, that I think it was Elijah that was, correct me if anybody knows if I'm wrong, that was walking with someone, and they were going into war against this huge army. And then Elijah said, because the guy's like, holy crow, we can't beat this huge army. And Elijah's like, hold up a minute. And, the heavens open up and there's chariots of fire everywhere. So I think it's Elijah, right? Yeah, absolutely. Not Elisha. So then Elijah meets Elisha, and the Lord says that he's going to be his his protege. And he meets him as he's out plowing the field with his oxes. And it just, when I was researching for it, it just reminds me so much of how Christ called all his followers. He just goes up and he's like, hey, come with me. And Elisha is like, okay. And he ends up, slaughtering the oxen that he was just using to plow the field. And then ends up going with Elijah. And Elijah is getting towards the end of his life, and he says to Elisha, what would you want if you could ask for one thing? And Elisha says, well, I would have a double portion of your spirit, because he wanted to carry on doing all these signs and wonders and miracles. And Elijah said, if you see me when the Lord takes me, then you will be granted this request. So it says that the Lord came in a whirlwind and took Elijah with him. Now that's other than Christ, that's one of two people that were kind of like up into the clouds. The other was Enoch. It says, I think it's in Genesis, Enoch walked with God, and he was, and then he was not. So I heard a really interesting teaching about that Enoch walked so closely with God, and he was just so fervent after the Lord's heart that at one point the Lord was just like, well, we're closer to my place now. Let's just go there instead. So, and he just, went with him. So then Elisha continued doing these miracles, these signs and miracles, and we're going to be in chapter 5, but right above chapter 5, it's another reference that really reminds me of Jesus. It starts in 42, and it just speaks about there's a large group of people, and they have a small amount of food, and they were able to feed all of those people with leftovers. So there's so many references to Christ in the Old Testament. It's pretty much all Christ. I forget who said it now. Somebody recently said the Old Testament is Christ concealed and the New Testament is Christ revealed. And you said that's from somebody's teaching.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I heard it from Chuck Missler like 20 years ago.
So yeah, it's good. So let's we'll hop back to 463, and I'll read the little intro there on the book of 2 Kings. The book of 2 Kings was originally part of a larger book that included 1 Kings. It recorded Israel's history from the end of David's reign to the demise of both its kingdoms. The book of 2 Kings opens with Israel already divided in northern and southern kingdoms. It records a succession of kings, many of them ungodly, and the inevitable movement of both kingdoms towards destruction and exile. First, the northern kingdom fell to Assyria, then the southern kingdom fell to Babylon. The procession of events in 2 Kings could easily be likened to a gathering darkness at nightfall. The people suffered from a progressive darkening of a spiritual nature, denial and unbelief that led to spiritual darkness. Along the way, there were prophets like Elijah, Elisha, and Isaiah, and kings like Hezekiah and Josiah, who did their best to brighten the horizon by restoring God's way among the people. But eventually, the influence of many godless kings brought destruction. The writer of Kings wanted to make sure that the exiled Israelites learned from the mistakes of their parents by narrating the events of their past. He showed how disobedience brought destruction and was the cause of their tragic plight. The people had disobeyed God despite God's repeated attempts to get their attention through his prophets and a few godly kings. The consequences for Israel's chronic sin were tragic and seemingly irreparable. The temple was destroyed, David's royal line no longer ruled in Jerusalem, and the people were exiled from their homeland. Despite the gloomy ending of this book, however, the story of God's people will continue with rebuilding and restoration. There is always hope for the future. I love that word. That word has really been on my heart a lot lately, restoration. There's just something about it that's really beautiful. And the other thing that it says, like, about mistakes, learning from parents' mistakes, I heard that once. I think it was on like a TED Talk or a podcast or something, that we learn best from mistakes, but they don't have to be our own. So
I had a lady in my life, and she said, "Lynn, I already made that mistake. Don't do that. I've done those for you. Go over here."
Right.
Go over
Right.
here.
But sometimes we just gotta run right into those mistakes ourselves. I just got like the image of running into a sliding glass door that's closed. Because that's pretty much what it is.
Yep.
Somebody's like, "Heather, the door's closed." No, it's not. It's open. Bam.
Yeah, I was a teenager, and I saw it when my older sister was living. I didn't want to live the way she was living, so I kind of directed my life
That's good.
in a different direction.
Yeah.
So I was learning from her mistake.
Yep.
She got three
That
different
wasn't
baby
that
fathers. I was like, no, that's not me.
Right. What a blessing to be able
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
Mhm. So good.
Yeah.
All right, chapter 5. The healing of Naaman. The king of Aram had great admiration for Naaman, the commander of his army, because through him the Lord had given Aram great victories. But though Naaman was a mighty warrior, he suffered from leprosy. Okay, I have to pause there. So the first thing that's interesting is Naaman is Syrian. He's an Assyrian man, so he's not an Israelite man, and same with Aram. So I just find it interesting that the Lord has given Aram great victories through Naaman. So recognizing that even in our culture today, the Lord can give victories to people that are not following him, for his good purpose, because he used all of this for his good purpose. Yeah. So recognizing, when we see things going on in our own world and thinking, why would that person be in power, or I don't understand, just recognizing that the Lord can use people that are not following a godly path for his glory. Okay. Verse 2. At this time, Aramean, raiders had invaded the land of Israel, and among their captives was a young girl who had been given to Naaman's wife as a maid. One day the girl said to her mistress, "I wish my master would go to see the prophet in Samaria. He would heal him of his leprosy." So that right there, the fact that she is hoping that he would be healed, it kind of speaks to his character. Because she's like a slave in their household, but she still wants to see this man get healed. So they must be treating her kindly. Otherwise, she'd be like, "Lord, just kill him already," But instead she wants to see him healed and gives him this advice to go see this great prophet. So Naaman told the king what the young girl from Israel had said. "Go and visit the prophet." The king of Aram told him, "I will send a letter of instruction for you to take to the king of Israel." So Naaman started out carrying gifts, 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. So that is 750 pounds of silver is about $266,000, and 150 pounds of gold is about $3 million.
What?
Yep, so it's a whole lot. The letter to the king, and we know how they like their clothing. Remember last week from Samson? Yeah, so he's bringing him 10 sparkly coats. Right, the sparkliest of coats. All right, so the letter to the king of Israel said, "With this letter I present my servant Naaman. I want you to heal him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes in dismay and said, "Am I God that I can give life and take it away? Why is this man asking me to heal someone with leprosy? I can see that he's just trying to pick a fight with me." Now, I can't even tell you how often I've done something like that, where yeah, right, where it's like, what do you want me to do about it? When they're not really asking me to do anything about it other than direct them to the proper resource, which as a recovery coach, that's like part of my job, is directing people to different resources. You know, it's not my job to.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's tearing his clothes, and it's all right because now he has 10 other sparkly coats, so he's fine. He's fine. All right, so verse 8. But when Elijah, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes in dismay, he sent a message to him. "Why are you so upset? Send Naaman to me, and he will learn that there is a true prophet here in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elisha's house. But Elijah sent a messenger out to him with this message: "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored, and you will be healed of your leprosy." Yeah. But Naaman became angry and stalked away. That's like Samson too. It's just like, and yeah, I was going to say like me too, because when the healing or whatever it is doesn't come the way I think it should come, then I want to throw a little hissy fit about it. So, yeah, I get it. So I thought he would certainly come out to meet me, he said. I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of the Lord his God and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus and Abana and Pharpar better than any of the rivers of Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed? So Naaman turned and went away with rage. Oh my goodness, it's just so relatable. But somebody had some sense. His officers tried to reason with him and said, "Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him when he says simply, 'Go and wash and be cured.'" So Naaman went down to the Jordan River and dipped himself 7 times as the man of God had instructed him, and his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, and he was healed. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I love obedience. Then Naaman and his entire party went back to find the man of God. They stood before him, and Naaman said, "Now I know that there is no God in the world except in Israel, so please accept a gift from your servant." But Elisha replied, "As surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept any gifts." And though Naaman urged him to take the gift, Elisha refused. Then Naaman said, "All right, but please allow me to load 2 of my mules with earth from this place, and I will take it back home with me. From now on, I will never again offer burnt offerings or sacrifices to any other god except the Lord. However, may the Lord pardon me in this one thing. When my master, the king, goes into the temple of the god Rimmon, I don't know how to say that, to worship there and leans on my arm, may the Lord pardon me when I bow too." So he is, that dude is the god of thunder and storms. "Go in peace," Elisha said. So Naaman started home again. So that, I find, that whole chunk right there is very interesting. So I don't even know how to begin to pull that apart. The first thing was, after Naaman was obedient, then Elijah came out to meet him. And I've often found in my life that, especially when it's something weird, if God asks me to do something weird and then I do it, then that's when his glory comes. That's when like this revelation knowledge comes. So that's the first part. The second part I found interesting was Elijah's reply, as surely as the Lord lives, like just acknowledging that God is living. God is a living being. And then about the earth, that's, I'm open to, because I know that that's important, but for the life of me, I couldn't, like, I recognize that they're in Israel and that is the Lord's portion. So I recognize that he wants to bring this earth back in order to build an altar to sacrifice to the God of Israel. And maybe that's just as deep as we go with that.
It's a holy ground he wants.
Maybe.
Right, yeah, holy ground.
Yeah.
And also the part where he asks to be pardoned if he leans, to support his king. So
It's
that
really a beautiful gesture.
it
to ask
really
that.
it really is. And I think
Total
about
humanity.
like for what it makes me think of is when Peter had the dream of where the sheet came down and the Lord's like, eat this thing, and he's like, it's unclean, and the Lord's like, no, it's not, not stumble other people. So even though in Naaman's mind he knows that it might not be the best thing for him, that his presence with his king and being there with him outweighs that in a way. Yeah, I'm grasping at straws, but that's what I'm getting. So that he that he may be able to be of an influence to his king as well. When he comes back and he's wholly healed like that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Absolutely.
undeniable. I mean, he's going to have the armor off and he's going to be able to be seen.
Right, because leprosy was like,
Unclean.
yeah, he must have been in the early stages of it, because I found it peculiar that he was still able to be like the head of this army while he was still having leprosy, because he must, again, like I said, he must have been at the very early stages, because eventually like your nose starts falling off and stuff. So
But you were not around people and stuff when you had leprosy.
yeah, no, you had to go like outside of the city, and then when you come into the city you have to announce that you're unclean so that people know to keep distance unless you're the king.
Yeah, and a lot of that was more strict in like Israel than other countries. Too.
Okay.
Yeah, good point.
Yep.
All right, let's read about the greed of Gehazi. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said to himself, my master should not have let this Aramean get away without accepting any of his gifts. As surely as the Lord lives, I will chase after him and get something from him. So Gehazi set off after Naaman. When Naaman saw Gehazi running after him, he climbed down from his chariot and went to meet him. Is everything all right? Naaman asked. Yes, Gehazi said, but my master has sent me to tell you that 2 young prophets from the hill country of Ephraim have just arrived and would like 75 pounds of silver and 2 sets of clothing to give them. By all means, take twice as much silver, Naaman insisted. He gave him 2 sets of clothing, tied up the money in 2 bags, and sent 2 of his servants to carry the gifts for Gehazi. But when they arrived at the citadel, Gehazi took the gifts from the servants and sent the men back. Then he went and hid the gifts inside the house. When he went in to his master, Elisha asked him, where have you been, Gehazi? I haven't been anywhere, he replied. But Elisha said to him, don't you realize that I was in the spirit when Naaman stepped down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to receive money and clothing, olive oil and vineyards, sheep and cattle, and male and female servants? Because you have done this, you and your descendants will suffer from Naaman's leprosy forever. When Gehazi left the room, he was covered with leprosy, and his skin was white as snow. Yep, you get no do-overs, man. That reminds me of the people that were hiding stuff from
AI?
Paul. Was it Paul? No. It was the apostles. It's in Acts. Yeah, when they came up and they're like, yeah, we gave everything we have to the church.
Yeah,
We're like, dead.
Ananias and Sapphira?
Yeah, Ananias and Sapphira. Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
So, and that's super cool too. That Elisha was in the spirit, so he was able to witness this. Like, when in the New Testament it says that Paul was called up in the spirit, John was called up in the spirit. So that's a real thing, and that's really super cool. And that's how people get those like words of knowledge, where you know things that you have no business knowing, because the spirit is, when you're in the spirit, there is no time, so it can be like a timeless sort of thing. So, and just the punishment is, I don't know, it's pretty harsh, but again, we can learn from somebody else's mistakes. Footnote on 470. People who are hurting deeply enough will try almost anything to find relief. For Naaman, the commander of the Aramean army, looking for help from a prophet in Israel was a desperate long shot. Naaman was willing to sacrifice prestige and wealth to find healing for his terrible disease. Naaman was healed of his leprosy, but not because he was willing to offer a reward. The real issue was not how much it costs. It was more important that he went to the only one who could really help him, the one true God. So he thought that he could go and buy his healing. So that reminds me of who was it in Acts, that Simon, was it, that came and asked him, he was like a witch doctor or something, and he came and asked the apostles how he could buy the power that they had, that healing power that they had.
Yeah, he asked to buy the Holy Spirit with their hands laid on him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's not something that we can buy. It's something that's freely given. So yeah. So yep, and that's yeah, that's a big one.
I think we've tried to do, not necessarily the Holy Spirit, but we try to bargain with God. We have in the past. If you do this, I'll do this. I swear I'll do it.
Oh, absolutely. Just this last time, Lord. Just save me this one last time, and I promise I'll never do it again. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we had Samson when he said one more.
Yeah, right?
That was it.
Yep, that was it for Samson. Yep, that one last time. Nope, and that's the thing, you don't know when your last time is going to be. So it's just, and that's, I mean, the Lord desires obedience rather than sacrifice. So that's an important thing. And it's even like when he's, digging in his heels, Naaman, he's like, I don't want to go in that dirty river. That's stupid. It reminds me a little bit of Jonah. How Jonah's like, I don't want to go tell those people to stop doing what they're doing. I'd rather they just all burn. So
They had some arrogance and pride there, though.
it is. It's
Don't you know
arrogance
who I
and
am? I'm
pride.
not going in that dirty river.
Right.
I'm already ticked off that you didn't come to me.
Right,
yourself.
right. Don't you
Now
know
might
who
go
I
in that dirty
am?
river.
Right, absolutely. But
I can be like that too. I don't-
But again, like with someone that has that much, which leads us into the devotional, which is a humble beginning, with that much pride, when we're laid low, it's that much more potent, coming from this place down to this place, because he had all this money, but what's wealth without health? So he knew that his leprosy was a death sentence. So eventually he was willing to be humble, to be that camel, and get down on his knees and say, all
As the
right.
dying can be.
Right.
know.
Yep. And that's such a frequent thing that the Lord uses those near-death experiences to elicit that humility. So he knows what he's doing. A humble beginning. Step 1, we admitted that we were powerless over our problems, that our lives had become unmanageable. It can be very humiliating to admit that we are powerless, especially if we are used to being in control. We may be powerful in some areas of our lives, but out of control in terms of our addictive compulsive behaviors. If we refuse to admit our powerlessness, we may lose everything. That one unmanageable part may infect and destroy everything else. That's like the poison. Remember when I was telling you guys about if I have one jar full of water and one jar full of poison, if I take one drop of the poison and put it in the water, will you drink it?
No.
No. So again, if I have one clean water, one jar of poison, if I take one drop of the water and put it in the poison, will you drink it?
No.
No. Because it doesn't work that way. It's so much easier for the poisonous things to permeate into the clean things than it is for the clean to permeate into the poison. And that's why that continual renewing of the mind, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of the mind. And there's another verse that speaks about wash me with the water of the word, that it's a constant, continuous washing. Another one of my favorite examples is the shower one. So if you guys all go home today and you take a really good shower and you get your best soap and you clean all of your parts everywhere in between your toes and behind your ears and everything, you'll never have to take a shower again, right? You'll be good. No. Right? No, Joanne, you good after one shower? Yeah. So yeah, it's a continual process that just by living in this world, we're going to be exposed to thoughts and ideas and speech and just different things that require the washing of the word and edifying through having theological discussions with brothers and sisters as well, because when from out of our bellies are those living waters, those rivers of living waters, and the iron sharpens iron, and the ability for somebody to see something in me that I might not be able to see myself because of, the distance. It's like that dot painting, that when you're really close, it just looks like a whole bunch of dots, but then when you back away, you can see that it's a picture. So somebody that's a little further away might be able to see the whole picture where I just see the little dots. So that's why having meetings like this and having at least one, spiritual person in your life that you can go to speak about things is so super important. Yeah, so because that just one unmanageable part. So it's that one secret sin, and that's in Psalm 19 where it speaks of, cleanse me of these secret sins that I might not even know I'm doing. So that can destroy my whole life. So having an accountability partner or an accountability group is so important on the Christian walk. All right, so the experiences of the Aramean army commander Naaman illustrate how this is true. He was a powerful military and political figure, a man of wealth, position, and power. He also had leprosy, which promised to bring about the loss of everything he held dear. Lepers were made outcasts from their families and from society. Ultimately, they faced a slow, painful, and disgraceful death. Naaman heard about a prophet in Israel who could heal him. He found the prophet, and the prophet told him that in order to be healed, he needed to dip himself 7 times in the Jordan River. Naaman went away outraged, having expected that his power would buy him an instant and easy cure. In the end, however, he acknowledged his powerlessness, followed the instructions, and recovered completely. Our diseases are as life-threatening as the leprosy of Naaman's day. They slowly separate us from our families and lead toward the destruction of everything important to us. There is no instant or easy cure. The only answer is to admit our powerlessness, humble ourselves, and submit to the process that will eventually bring recovery. I would venture to say that sometimes it can happen suddenly, and the reason that I would venture to say that sometimes it can happen suddenly is because it did in my life. Like, there was some things that I was immediately delivered from, and there were some things that it was a process. So, and it's just, again, it's God knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing, and he knows the necessity of that refining period for us. And that's what it's pruning. It hurts, it's painful, but ultimately when we endure that process with the right attitude, we come out looking more like Jesus Christ.